Jacques Moreau wiped the black oil from his pale face and hissed softly as the twin suns burned his eyes. Even with his dark visor pulled low, the light of this strange world bit into his skin like tiny needles. Smoke boiled up from the torn engine of his cargo ship, curling black against the orange sky. Broken metal ribs stuck out at odd angles. Sparks snapped from severed power conduits. The crash onto the violet world of Zéphyria had been hard. Too hard. Purple grass rippled like a sea around the ruined ship. Two suns hung high, one gold, one a cold white coin, over jagged crystal trees with silver leaves that chimed when the wind passed through them. It was beautiful, but painfully bright to someone like him. Jacques was a Nocturnian, a star vampire from the Royaume Nocturne, the vampire kingdom that ruled from the black citadel of Val-de-Nuit. He was a simple man among his people, more comfortable with engines than thrones. He ferried cargo between outposts, living on ration packs and sealed flasks of synthetic blood. Now his ship lay broken, and the nearest shade was a shattered wing. He pulled out his tools and got to work. A thick hull plate had crumpled over the main engine core. On any normal world, under shipyard conditions, they'd have used a grav crane to lift it. Jacques was alone. He bent, slid his fingers under the twisted plate, and lifted. Metal screamed as it rose. Muscles and old night blood surged together. The plate came up as if it were just a stubborn door. Jacques set it aside and squinted up at the suns, his lips pulling back from pointed teeth in irritation. He did not know that 3 pairs of crimson eyes were watching him from the shadow of the silver trees. The daughters of Zaphiria, Zeia, Leanne, and Cassandra, crouched behind a stand of shimmering crystal trunks, cloaks drawn tight around their pale blue skin. They were daughters of the Veltari, the star vampires of Zaphiria, though the galaxy whispered horror stories about them, blood drinkers in a crystal city who ruled the night. The truth was more complicated. Their people had not tasted living blood in centuries. They drank sang étoile, star-distilled crimson light from their planet's crystal veins. But old fears died slowly, even among the Veltari themselves. Zeia flicked a lock of midnight blue hair out of her face and stared. "Tu as vu ça?" she whispered. "Did you see that?" He lifted the whole plate, alone. Leanne, the smallest of the 3, with short silver hair and serious violet eyes, shook her head. "C'est impossible. That much metal, it would take 5 of our strongest knights." Cassandra, whose wavy hair was the same purple as the grass, narrowed her eyes. "Maybe he's using hidden grav fields." She sniffed delicately, fangs catching the light. "He smells warm." "Immortal," Zeia breathed. "A living one, on our world." That alone was enough to frighten them. Mortal blood was legend here now, sung about in old songs, locked away in old sins. The Veltari had sworn never to feed on the living again. That oath had cost them much. They watched as Jacques bent thick pipes bare-handed as if they were soft clay. He moved as though gravity were lighter for him than for anyone else. "We must tell the council," Zeia muttered. "Or help him," Leanne said softly. Look at him. He is alone, and the suns burn his skin like they burn ours." Cassandra bit her lip. Both can be true. First contact. The twin suns slid lower, stretching long shadows over the crash site. Jacques worked until his hands ached and his reserves of synthetic blood ran low. He knew he'd need shade, and soon. A faint chiming made him pause. Not metal. Leaves. He turned. 3 women stood at the edge of the crystal grove. They looked almost human, but not quite. Their skin was the pale blue of dawn shadows. Their hair shone in strange colors, blue, silver, and violet. Their eyes were red, but not angry. Ruby irises that caught the light like cut gems. When they parted their lips in surprise, he saw the glint of small, sharp fangs. Jacques froze. Vampires. He knew the legends of Zaphiria, a distant, independent vampire kingdom that even the Nocturne court treated with wary respect. A world that had walked away from bloodshed and never returned to it. A kingdom of crystal and night. He had not expected to crash on this world. "Salute," he called, then quickly switched to trade standard. "Hello, I won't hurt you." The 3 stepped back, cloaks tightening. "It speaks," Cassandra whispered in Veltari. "Of course he speaks," Zeia murmured. "The question is, does he bite?" Jacques raised his hands slowly, showing empty palms. "My name is Jacques Moreau," he said. "I'm from the Royaume Nocturne. My ship is broken." The women exchanged quick musical words in their own language. Finally, Zélie stepped forward, her accent thick but understandable. "I am Zélie de Valambre," she said. "This is Liane and Cassandre. You are human?" She sniffed again. "Half human, perhaps, but warm-blooded. Living." "Mostly living," Jacques said with a crooked smile. He tapped his visor. "Half vampire, fully tired." Liane blinked. "Ensemble Malay." Cassandra whispered. "From the Nocturne Kingdom?" Jacques nodded. "I didn't mean to trespass. My navigation failed. I was just passing through your system." Zélie's red eyes flicked to the mangled engine. "You moved all these pieces yourself?" "Yes." "Pourquoi?" Liane asked, genuinely puzzled. "How can you make iron obey you like that?" Jacques frowned. "They're not that heavy. I've lifted worse in the dry docks." He walked over to a hull segment the size of a table and picked it up again to demonstrate. The three young Veltari gasped, their fangs flashing white. "This is not possible," Zélie whispered. "Even our night knights could not do this barehanded. Are all Nocturnians like you?" "Stronger, some of them," Jacques said. "I'm just the mechanic." They stared at him as if he'd declared himself a minor god. "We must go," Zélie said at last. "The Conseil de Nuit must hear of this." "Attends," Jacques said quickly. "Wait, I need water, shade, maybe help with the ship. I can pay in tech or repairs." Zélie hesitated. He smelled dangerous, strong, warm, full of the living blood their bodies remembered, but he also looked tired and strangely gentle for someone who could bend steel. "We will speak to our elders," she said. "Stay near your ship. Do not go into the crystal wilds, even we avoid them in the bright hours." "Deal," Jacques said. The three young vampires vanished into the silver forest, leaving him alone again under the bleeding light of twin suns. By the time night fell, Jacques had made a small camp under the broken wing with a metal cast deep shade. The stars above were brilliant and unfamiliar, clustering around one particularly dark patch of sky like a crown. 3 nights passed. The Veltari came, but kept their distance. Guard shapes watched from the trees, eyes glowing dimly in the dark. They never came close enough to speak. Jacques worked on his engine, rationing his synthetic blood and thinking about how awkward it would be to die of thirst on a planet full of vampires who didn't drink people anymore. On the 4th night, a sound tore through the quiet. Shouts, panicked and sharp, in the Veltari tongue. Jacques set down his tools and listened. It wasn't the chiming of crystal trees or the wind. This was fear. He jogged toward the forest. 2 cloaked Veltari guards stepped in front of him, hissing warnings. "I heard someone screaming," Jacques said, gesturing toward the sound. "Someone needs help." One guard darted back toward the distant lights of a city. The other tried to block Jacques' path, but Jacques simply sidestepped and kept running. The cries led him to a jagged hole in the ground, a crystal mine, its entrance half collapsed. Pale blue Veltari clustered around it, their red eyes wide, their voices high and frantic. Huge shards of luminous crystal had crashed down, sealing the passage. Zélie was there, her midnight hair tousled, her cloak thrown aside. Tears glittered on her cheeks. When she saw Jacques, she stumbled toward him. "S'il te plaît," she gasped in broken standard. "Please, my brother is trapped inside. Fix, the crystals fell. He cannot get out." Jacques looked at the entrance. The fallen crystals were beautiful, glowing gently from within like frozen starlight, but each was the size of a boulder. "How long?" he asked. "Since the last bells," Leon said, appearing at Zélie's side. He cried out at first. Now it is quiet. An elderly Veltari man, his silver hair tied back, stepped forward. His fangs showed as he spoke. "Leave this place, étranger. This is our sorrow, not yours. You will only make things worse." "I just want to move the rocks," Jacques said calmly. "If I can." The old man's bitter laugh showed long years of fear. "We have 20 men here. We are children of the night, blessed with the strength of shadows. If we cannot move them, how will you?" Jacques didn't argue. He walked to the largest crystal shard, bent and lifted. Blue light washed over his face as the shard tore free of the ground with a crack and a shudder. The crowd gasped and recoiled. Whispers hissed through the air. "Mon Dieu," Cassandra whispered as she and more Veltari arrived. "He is lifting the heart shards." One by one, Jacques carried the crystals away from the blocked entrance. Some were so heavy they had gouged trenches in the earth where they fell. To him, they were simply heavy things that needed to be moved. "It is like watching a mountain walk," Leon murmured. Soon, a narrow passage appeared, but deeper inside he could see more fallen shards jammed together. "I'm going in," Jacques said. The old man grabbed his sleeve. "No. The ceiling could fall again. We cannot lose another life." "I'm hard to kill," Jacques said simply, "and he's your family." He ducked into the tunnel. Inside, the air was cool and bright crystal glow. It hummed against his skin, feeding some deep vampiric hunger he hadn't known he had. Not for blood, but for light, for energy. It steadied him. "Felix," he shouted, faintly, from deep within. "I see. Here." Jacques moved faster, ripping away shards that blocked his path, until he found a small form trapped under overlapping crystals. A boy with Zélia's blue skin and wide red eyes, his leg pinned, face streaked with dust. "Hey," Jacques said gently, "I've got you." He braced, lifted 2 shards at once, and rolled them aside. The tunnel shuddered but held. Felix sobbed in relief as Jacques scooped him up and carried him back through the glowing corridors. When Jacques stepped out into the night with the boy in his arms, the gathered Valtari broke into cries that were half laughter and half weeping. "Felix!" Zelia ran forward, almost too fast to see, and took her brother, sobbing into his hair as he clung to her. The old man who had mocked Jacques earlier stepped forward, shoulders bowed. "Je suis désolé," he said. "I was wrong about you, étranger. You saved our child." "Jacques," he corrected with a small smile. "Just Jacques, and you're welcome." A Valtari healer bent over Felix's leg, her finger glowing faintly as she traced sigils on the skin. "It is broken," she announced, "but he will live." Felix reached for Jacques' sleeve. "Merci," he said in a small, trembling voice. "I thought the dark would swallow me." "It won't," Jacques said, "not tonight." An older woman approached, and the crowd parted for her. Her hair was pure white, braided and wrapped with silver thread. Robes of shimmering crystal cloth flowed around her, casting rainbows on the ground. "Je suis Dame Ninon," she said, "elder of the Night Council." She studied Jacques carefully. "Zélia spoke of you, Jacques Moreau. I did not believe her stories of your strength." "I just lifted what needed lifting," he said. "You did more than that." Her gaze slid to the piled crystals, each larger than a person. "Our strongest shadow guards need machines to shift shards that size. You moved them with your hands." She was quiet for a long time, then nodded. "You said your ship is broken. Perhaps we can help. Our crystals channel starlight and blood memory. They power our cities. Maybe they can awaken your machine." Jacques felt hope stir. "I'd be grateful. In return, I can share schematics. Or work, or both." Dame Ninon smiled faintly. "You saved one of our children. That is a debt no treaty can measure. You are welcome in the crystal city of Étoile Sombre as a guest of the Night Council." The Festival of Strength. 2 weeks later, Jacques was almost used to the soft glow of crystal walls and the way the streets of Étoile Sombre came alive after sunset. The Valtari lived mostly by night now, their oath to abandon living blood woven into everything: music, art, even their power grids. Crimson light flowed through transparent veins carved into buildings, humming like distant heartbeats. Jacques lived in a guest house of dark blue crystal. Zélia, Leon, and Cassandra visited every evening, teaching him their language. In return, he told them about the Nocturne kingdom and the uneasy peace vampires and humans had carved out together. Still, he noticed the Valtari men watching him differently. He was a walking reminder that their legendary, monstrous strength had become more story than fact, while a half-mortal stranger casually lifted stones and engines that defeated them. One night, Cassandra burst into his house without knocking. "Jacques, La Fête de la Force is coming." "The what now?" Jacques asked, setting aside a crystal circuit board. "The Festival of Strength," Leon explained, slipping in after her. "Once a year, all our strongest compete, lifting sacred stones, carrying blood vessels up the night stair, moving the ancient blocks our ancestors carved. It is a great honor to win," Zelia added. "The champions sit at the right hand of the council during feasts. Their names are carved into the obsidian wall." That same evening, they brought him to meet the festival organizers, in a shadowed chamber carved high into a crystal spire. Dame Ninon sat at the center. At her right stood a tall Valtari man, with dark blue skin and hair like poured silver. His shoulders were broad beneath his crystal-linked armor, and his red eyes measured Jacques calmly. "This is Maxence de Clairombre," Ninon said. "He has won the Festival of Strength 5 years in a row, the strongest of our city." Maxence inclined his head, his expression polite but cool. So, you are the Nocturnian half-blood who moved the heart shards as if they were pebbles. Jacques said, offering a hand. Maxence looked at it for a moment, then ignored it. Some whisper that your strength is unnatural. Others say it is simply what mortals are like where you come from. His gaze sharpened. Tell me, Jacques Moreau, are all of your kind like you? Jacques shrugged, some stronger, some weaker. I fix things. I'm not a champion. A woman with dark hair cut bluntly at her shoulders leaned forward, amused. Jacques had met her once before. Vera Marceau, council member, mother of 2 daughters who watched Jacques like a new comet. If he is not a champion, she said lightly, what does that make our dear Maxence? Maxence's jaw tightened. Perhaps, he said carefully, our guest would like to honor our traditions by joining the contests. Ninon frowned. He is our guest, Maxence. We do not demand such things. C'est un honneur, Vera said smoothly. If he refuses, some will say he hid his strength. If he accepts and loses, all will see that our legends still stand. She glanced at Jacques. If he wins, then perhaps our people need new stories. Jacques hesitated only a moment. I'll compete, he said, if you're sure it won't offend anyone. The festival celebrates courage as much as strength, Ninon said at last. If your heart is honorable, you are welcome. Maxence's smile didn't reach his eyes. Très bien. Then we will see, under the gaze of the stars, what sort of power the Nocturne Kingdom sends us. The Festival of Strength lit the crystal city like a second moon. Banners of deep red and soft violet hung from tall spires. Music thrummed through the streets, drums echoing like heartbeats. Children wore wreaths of silver leaves, and lanterns filled with soft red light floated between the towers like captive stars. The first contest was lifting the pierres sacrées, ancient stones carved and blessed when the Valtari still drank blood beneath a single sun. The smallest weighed more than a man, the largest was 3 times that. 20 competitors lined up. Jacques stood at the end, wearing a simple dark shirt with the crest of the Nocturne Kingdom, an eclipsed moon, stitched at the collar. The crowd buzzed with whispers. He does not look so different from us. I saw him move a hull beam with one arm. My aunt says he ripped a crystal door from its hinges by accident. Each competitor took a turn. Most could lift the smallest stone, half managed the middle. Only 3, including Maxence, raised the largest, veins standing out in their necks as they strained. Then Jacques stepped forward. He bent, wrapped his arms around the smallest stone, and lifted it like a child's toy. The crowd gasped. Without showboating, he set it down gently and moved to the middle stone. That, too, rose easily. Then came the largest. It was dark, veined with faint red light, carved with old sigils of blood and night. No one had ever lifted it overhead. Maxence had managed to raise it to his knees and stagger a few steps. That alone had made him champion. Jacques gripped it, braced, and raised it high above his head. For a moment the world was silent. Then the city roared. Before anyone could stop him, Jacques walked to a decorative stone off to the side, an even larger boulder, used only as a symbol of the first Valtari king. He crouched and lifted that too, until it rested on his shoulder like a sack of grain. Maxence's face darkened to nearly midnight blue. The second contest was carrying heavy crystal blood vessels, great, sealed jars glowing with sang étoile, up the steep night stair that wound along the side of a cliff. The path was narrow and slick with dew, a test of both strength and balance. The Valtari men strained, their breaths coming in white puffs as they climbed. Many stumbled and spilled crimson light onto the stone, to groans from the crowd. Jacques took 2 of the heaviest vessels, 1 in each arm. The glow painted his pale face red as he climbed. The weight barely slowed him. He reached the top without spilling a drop and turned, grinning, to wave at the crowd below. The cheering echoed off the cliffs until bats burst from hidden crevices, startled into flight. Zélie, Leanne, and Cassandra shrieked with laughter, hugging each other. Regardless, Zélie shouted, he dances with the blood vessels. The final contest was moving the ancient blocks. These were massive stone rectangles carved by the first Valtari, covered in sacred inscriptions that told the story of their oath to abandon living blood. It usually took a team of 6 experienced competitors to slide one of them a few feet. Teams were assigned. Maxence led a squad of elite night knights. Jacques was given a group of younger men who looked more nervous than proud. When the horn sounded, Maxence and his team leaned into their block, straining. Inch by inch, it scraped forward. After an hour of sweat and grunts, they had moved it 10 feet. Jacques studied his own block. "Step back," he said quietly. His team blinked. "But, trust me." They did, perhaps because they had seen him lift the king's stone. Jacques planted his feet, pressed both hands against the block, and pushed. It slid. Slowly at first, then faster, until the heavy stone was gliding across the worn ground as if the earth itself were helping. He drove it 20 feet, then 30, then 50, until festival officials shouted at him to stop before he pushed it off the marked field entirely. For a heartbeat, there was only stunned silence. Then the city erupted. Some people laughed, some cried. Others simply stared in open awe at the half-mortal stranger who had moved their holiest stone as if it were furniture. Dame Ninon rose on the judge's platform, her voice steady over the uproar. "Jamais, never, in all our history, has one person moved an ancient block so far. Jacques Moreau of the Nocturne Kingdom has shown us a strength beyond our tales." Afterward, people swarmed Jacques, touching his arms, asking questions. "Are all Nocturnians like to you?" a young woman asked breathlessly. "Non," Jacques said honestly. "Most of my people are weaker than the stories say. Many humans are not this strong either. I'm an odd case. Old blood, stubborn bones." Vera approached him with her 2 daughters who giggled and clung to each other. "If you are an odd case," she said, amused, "I cannot imagine what a usual one looks like." Jacques laughed, but he saw Maxence at the far table, sitting stiffly, his jaw tight, his gaze turned away. At the feast that followed, Jacques sat at the place of honor beside Dame Ninon. Zelia slid into the seat at his other side. "You held back," she murmured as roasted root dishes and crystal flasks were passed. "You could have done more." "A little," he admitted. "They're your traditions. I didn't want to crush anyone's pride." "You lifted the king's stone," she pointed out. "Our pride will recover in a century or 2. Jacques looked around. Many of the women watched him openly. Some of the men stared too, but with unease rather than admiration. "This changed something," he said quietly. "Not just for me." "Yes," Zelia said, following his gaze. "They used to tell their children that we Veltari were the strongest predators the stars had ever known. Tonight they met someone who proves that a predator is not defined by fangs alone." Jacques' fingers brushed the rim of his crystal cup, feeling the hum of stored starlight. "Strength without kindness," he murmured, "is just another kind of hunger." Zelia looked at him sidelong. "You speak like one of our old poets, Jacques Moreau." He snorted. "Don't tell the Nocturne court. They'll start inviting me to banquets." Neither of them knew that ships were already on their way, ships whose captains still believed the old stories about monsters on Zaphiria. The Corvani arrived. A month after the festival, the engineers of Étoile Sombre had nearly finished repairing Jacques' ship. Crystal conduits now ran alongside his old power lines, pulsing with red-white light. The vessel hummed softly in its berth just outside the city, like a sleeping beast. Jacques found himself in no hurry to leave. He had grown to love the crystal gardens, the music that started at twilight and went on until dawn. The way the whole city gathered every night in the plaza when the moons were full. More and more, when he thought about home, he pictured Zélia's crooked smile and Leanne's shy questions, Cassandra's quick laughter. Then the sky darkened with silhouettes. Ships. Big ones. The Veltari had no warfleet. They rarely left their system at all. The vessels now descending into orbit were clearly made by hands that loved weapons. Dame Ninon convened the Night Council at once and summoned Jacques. On a hovering crystal panel, he saw the incoming ships, long-spined, bristling with gun arrays. Their hulls were matte black, marked with the red sigil of a 5-pointed crown. "Corvani," Jacques said grimly. "The Dominion." "You know them?" Ninon asked. "By reputation," Jacques said. "They conquer weak worlds, enslave populations, protect them in exchange for tribute. They hate anything they don't understand." He glanced at the council. "And I'm afraid they've heard the same old stories about your people as everyone else." 3 days later, the Corvani landed on the plains outside Étoile Sombre. Their soldiers were tall, with gray skin and burning red eyes, not from hunger, but from implanted optics. They wore jagged black armor with power lines pulsing under the plates. Their leader towered above them all, nearly 8 feet, his armor crowned with a spiked ring. He introduced himself as General Valk. "This world now belongs to the Corvani Dominion," he announced. His voice was deep and harsh enough to make the crystal trees tremble. "You will surrender half your energy crystals and labor force as tribute. In return, we will let you continue your existence." Dame Ninon stood before him, flanked by counselors. Jacques stood slightly behind her, Zélie, Leon, and Cassandra at his side, despite Ninon's orders to stay back. "We are a peaceful people," Ninon said calmly. "We have done nothing to provoke you. We do not seek war." Val laughed. "You are monsters from old tales, blood drinkers who hid in the dark and preyed on the weak. We come to tame you. Be grateful." Jacques stepped forward before he could stop himself. "They haven't drunk living blood in centuries," he said. "Their strength is in restraint, not conquest." Val turned his burning eyes on Jacques. "And what are you, little shade? Another one of these crystal leeches?" "Jacques Moreau," Jacques said. "Nocturne Kingdom, half vampire, half human, mechanic. Then, because he couldn't help it, part-time festival champion." A murmur went through the Veltari crowd at that. Voss snorted. "I have never heard of your kingdom. You smell warm, human, mostly, weak." One of his lieutenants stepped forward, grinning. "Allow me to demonstrate, General." He held out a hand to Jacques. "A greeting," he said, pitching his voice for the watching crowd. Jacques recognized the trick. He took the offered hand anyway. The lieutenant squeezed, trying to crush Jacques' bones for the audience. Jacques squeezed back. The Corvani's grin faltered, then broke. His eyes widened. Bones ground against bones. He made a small involuntary noise. "What is happening, Lieutenant Corin?" General Vaux asked sharply. "Il est très fort," Corin gasped. "He's strong, sir." Jacques let go. Corin stumbled back, flexing a hand that would bruise. Interesting, Vaux thought, though he did not say it aloud. Instead, he drew a thick black metal staff from his back, the symbol of his command. "This rod is forged from our strongest alloy," he said. "Reinforced Corva steel. No one has ever bent it. Show me your strength, half-blood." He held out the rod. Jacques took it. It was heavy, but well-balanced. He looked from the rod to Val, then to the silent Veltari crowd. "All right," he said quietly. "But remember, you asked." He gripped both ends and bent. The metal groaned, then shrieked, then folded like wax. In a moment it was a perfect U-shape. Jacques handed it back. The Corvani stared. "This is impossible," Val muttered, staring at the bent staff. "Corva steel doesn't yield." "Maybe you should ask it nicely next time," Jacques said. Zélie snorted a laugh before she could stop herself. To prove it wasn't a trick, Jacques walked to one of the Corvani supply crates, huge, designed to be moved only by gravelifters, and lifted it overhead with one hand. The soldiers fell silent. A few took involuntary steps back. "Combien?" Jacques asked conversationally. "How many crates do you need moved?" Vaux's gaze sharpened. "How many of you are there?" "Of me," Jacques said. "Just me, of my kind?" He thought of the Nocturne Kingdom, the hidden human colonies, the scattered vampire courts. Billions, some stronger, some weaker. Most don't like bullies. A lie, but a useful one. He could almost hear the gears turning in Vaux's mind. "If this is average," the general said slowly, "your kind would be useful allies, or very dangerous enemies." He pulled a small device from his belt and scanned Jacques. The screen flashed, beeped, then blinked red. "This cannot be right," Val muttered. "Your physical metrics exceed our enhanced soldiers, exceed some of our vehicles." "Your scanner is fine," Jacques said. "I bend stubborn things, metal, old stories. Empires, maybe." Ninon stepped forward, seizing the moment. "You came here expecting monsters," she said to Vaux. "You see now that we have chosen another path. We do not feed on the weak, we protect them, and we are not alone in that." She gestured to Jacques. "Leave this world in peace, General, or learn whether the tales you tell about us are large enough to include him." Val looked at the bent rod, at his nervous soldiers, at the silent ranks of Veltari watching from the crystal terraces. "I will confer with my superiors," he said at last. "This changes things." He turned away. The Corvani withdrew to their ships, leaving cracked earth and a stunned city behind. A different kind of hunger. The Corvani did not leave the system immediately. Their ships lingered in high orbit, like dark birds circling something they could not decide to eat or leave alone. 2 weeks later, Jacques' repaired ship chirped with an incoming signal. The screen lit with General Vaux's scarred face. This time, the general wore no armor, only a simple dark uniform. His eyes were still hard but less mocking. "Jacques Moreau," he said. "I request an audience. No soldiers, no weapons," Ninon agreed cautiously. The meeting took place in the council chamber, under a ceiling of slowly turning red crystal. Vaux entered alone and bowed, stiff but genuine. "I have shared your readings and your story with the Dominion High Council," he said. "We have never encountered a being like you, or a world like this." He paused. "We have decided that the Valtari and the Nocturne Kingdom would be far more useful as allies than as slaves." "What does that mean exactly?" Ninon asked. Vaux took a breath. "We propose a treaty. The Corvani Dominion will recognize Zéphyria and the Royaume Nocturne as sovereign powers. We will never invade or demand tribute from you. In return, we hope for mutual defense and trade. Your crystal technology is impressive, your half-blood strength even more so." "I am not a weapon you can borrow," Jacques said dryly. "No," Vaux agreed, "but your presence proved something to us. The galaxy is changing. The old hunger that drove us to conquer every shadow we saw, it cannot be sustained forever. There will always be someone stronger or kinder who refuses to kneel." He reached into a bag and pulled out the bent black rod. "I have kept this," he said, "as a reminder. None of my soldiers can straighten it." He laid it on the table before Jacques. "Would you?" Jacques picked it up. Metal remembered his hands. He bent it back into a straight line with a few slow, deliberate motions, then set it down. "It was never about the rod," he said quietly. "It was about what you meant to do with it." Vaux inclined his head. "We would like to meet with your Nocturne Queen and your human authorities, if they differ. We want peace, or at least a truce." Jacques felt the weight of possibility settle on his shoulders, heavier than any stone he'd lifted. "I can carry your message," he said. "I won't promise they'll like you, but I'll tell them you're trying, and that's a start." Ninon glanced at him. "You would leave us?" "Not for good," Jacques said. "I can send messages from here with your crystal relays. I can be a bridge between the kingdom, the humans, the Valtari, and the Corvani." Then perhaps the strangest truth of all is this. A half-starved mechanic from a vampire kingdom may be the one who keeps us from tearing the stars apart. Ambassador of Night, the Night Council met long into the following day cycle. In the end, they made Jacques an offer. "Stay," Ninon said. "Remain on Zaphiria as the first Ambassador de Nuit, an ambassador of the Nocturne Kingdom and of humanity to our people. When your rulers wish to speak to us, you will already be here." "You would have work," Vera added. "Real work. Helping our engineers balance your machines and our crystals, teaching our artists your stories, bringing us news of your worlds." "And you would not be alone," Zeia said quietly, not quite looking at him. Jacques stood in the middle of the council chamber, feeling the weight of three very different skies on his shoulders. The cold stars over Val-de-Nuit, the smog-dimmed lights over human megacities, the shining crystal constellations of Zaphiria. He thought of the old vampire hunger that still whispered in his bones, the kind that said, "Take what you can, be feared, be first." Then he thought of Felix's small, shaking hand in his sleeve, of Maxence's tight, ashamed eyes, of General Vaux setting down his weapon. "All right," he said. "I'll stay. I'll send the treaties from here. If my queen agrees, Zaphiria will be the place where our worlds meet." The message he sent across the star lanes was long and carefully written. He described the Valtari oath, the crystal technology, the Corvani's hesitation at the edge of war. He did not brag about bending rods or lifting stones. He simply explained, again and again, that sometimes the strongest thing a predator can do is choose not to feed. When the reply came from the Nocturne Queen and the human councils, it was cautious but hopeful. They accepted the Corvani's offer of a truce and recognized Zaphiria as a neutral meeting world. Jacques was formally confirmed as their joint envoy. Years passed. Trade routes opened. Corvani ships began arriving with gifts instead of gunships. Human engineers walked the crystal streets of Étoile Sombre, squinting in wonder. Valtari artists visited the Nocturne Kingdom, painting their dark towers with luminous murals. Maxence, who had sulked for months, finally approached Jacques one night on a balcony overlooking the crystal gardens. "I hated you," he said bluntly. "You made me feel small, like a child again, listening to tales of monsters under the bed." "I wasn't trying to," Jacques said. "I know," Maxence said. He looked down at his hands. But I have been thinking, perhaps strength is not the right thing to measure myself against you with. What is then? Jacques asked. Maxence smiled ruefully. How many people I stand in front of when danger comes. How quickly I apologize when I am wrong. How willing I am to share my cup rather than hoard it. He glanced at Jacques. In those measures, I have much work to do. They clasped forearms. From that night on, they were friends. The moral of Blood and Stone. On the one-year anniversary of Jacques' crash, the Valteri declared a new celebration. La Nuit de l'Amitié Humaine, Human Friendship Night. The plaza of Étoile Sombre glowed with 1,000 lanterns of red and gold. Children wore little paper visors like Jacques' to tease him. Musicians blended nocturne melodies with crystal harmonies and Corvani drum patterns. Dame Ninon stepped onto the central platform. "Anon," she said, her voice amplified by the crystals. "1 year ago, a ship fell from the sky. We expected raiders, or prey. Instead, we met a mechanic who could move mountains, and a heart that refused to conquer anything." The crowd laughed softly. "When we first saw Jacques Moreau's strength, we were afraid," Ninon went on. "Not because he was a monster, but because he showed us how small our old stories were. We had told our children that being Valtari meant being the strongest, that our hunger made us terrible and special." She spread her hands. "This year has taught us something else. Strength without mercy is only another kind of hunger. Teeth without kindness are only another kind of chain. But when someone strong chooses to protect instead of devour, to lift instead of crush, that is a power worth building a world around." She gestured for Jacques. He stepped up, the crowd cheering loud enough to rattle the crystal towers. "When I crashed here," he said, "I thought I was lost. I expected to wake up with my blood in someone else's cup." The crowd laughed again, some a little guiltily. "Instead, I woke up with friends." He looked at the faces before him, blue and gray and human pink, all lit red by lantern light. "You Valtari could be terrifying," he said frankly. "You have fangs, night vision, a planet full of power. The Corvani could be terrifying. You have guns and ships. The Nocturne Kingdom could be terrifying. We have very dramatic capes." More laughter. "But the thing that decided whether any of us were monsters was never our teeth or our engines. It was what we chose to do with them." He glanced toward Maxence, standing with his arms folded, a small smile on his face. Toward Val, who had come in person and stood awkwardly at the back without armor. Toward Zélie, Liane, and Cassandra in the front row, eyes shining. "I've learned something here," Jacques said. "Being strong isn't about what you can lift or how hard you can bite. It's about what you're willing to carry for someone else. It's choosing to be hungry rather than full, if the only way to get full is to hurt someone who can't fight back." He paused. "The galaxy is full of predators," he went on quietly. "But tonight, looking at you all, I think it's also full of protectors who just haven't met each other yet." The crowd was silent for a heartbeat, then erupted into cheers that rang like crystal bells. Later, as the celebration spilled into the gardens, Zélie walked beside Jacques under the alien stars that now felt like home. "Do you ever regret staying?" she asked, voice soft. Jacques looked up at the sky. Somewhere out there, the black towers of Val-de-Nuit pierced a different night. Human cities buzzed with neon. Corvani fleets circled distant suns. He thought of all of it, and then of this place, of Félix racing along crystal bridges on heeled legs, of Maxence training younger guards, of Vaux awkwardly learning to dance, of Zélie's hand brushing his as they walked. "Non," he said. "Never." She smiled, small and sharp and honest. "Good, because we would have had to drag you back." He bared his fangs in a grin. "Try," he said. She laughed, a sound like silver leaves in a midnight wind, and together they walked on through the Vampire Kingdom in the stars, a place where aliens came in fear and stayed in friendship, where a half-blood mechanic had proved that the real difference between a monster and a guardian was not what they were made of, but what and whom they chose to protect.